Good evening, everybody. I'm happy to be here and happy to see all of you. It is an honor for AMI to have Muhammad Zahid Aziz at our conference this year. Zahid has many degrees from England and Malaysia. He's a retired Islamic banker and now monetary reformist who wants to assist the world humanity in understanding what is behind the common problems befalling us. Armed with 30 years of experience in the Islamic muamalat industry, and through his NGO, Movement for Monetary Justice Malaysia, Zahid fights for justice in the current insidious monetary system. Maybe most of us here don't know what the muamalat industry is. In Islam, muamalat is the intersection of morality with business and law and all public action. Zahid shows how the bank credit system steals the purchasing power of the downtrodden, empowering the already powerful. Teaching about the true nature of the monetary system we practice, domestic and international, he urges the Muslim Ummah in particular to think as always demanded by the Quran, not to rely on the foundation of shaky knowledge and beliefs built on the pillars of injustice. He's the author of 2 books, including The Foams of the Waves of the Sea, the Case for an Islamic Monetary System. So Zahid, thank you very much for being here. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary. Pleased to meet you again. Good morning, everybody from tomorrow. Young Kim and I, and we are on Saturday morning, 28th of September. I believe you're still on Friday night. Anyway, the world is fine. Thank you to AMI for inviting me again to deliver my talk. I took the opportunity to rename my talk, if you don't mind, Stephen and Mary. The title, Hard Talk, by a monetary reformer to monetary reformers, of public banking and sovereign money and getting it done. The reason that I chose this particular topic is that I begin to see that our monetary reform has not addressed too much the human suffering. It's more about the transparency of CBDCs and things, and very, very soft things like that, which is good, but I particularly would like to fight to regain human dignity in this system, in this insidious system of ours. Yeah. Okay, let me move. All right. So basically, let me request everyone to be on my page. My page says that while it's nice to talk about CBDCs, monetary reform to achieve economic stability and transparency, etc., also greening of the monetary system, I would like to divert the focus of my friends towards the real issue, in my opinion, which is human suffering. Yeah? And it's not confined to any particular part of the world. We share this suffering equally, no matter where we are. Yeah? And we need to really keep up front the battering humanity has received from the current monetary system, and we should not divert too much away from talking about human suffering. We have people who died because of the monetary system. You know? Okay, we have suffered enough from this system, which is actually being practiced in every country. I think I do not need to go into the history. Everybody knows about, how the Federal Reserve was formed, how they took over the Bank of International Settlements to ensure that the whole world follow the same system. Okay, I'm not going to dwell too much on that, but we need to ask, were we asked before we accepted this system in our country? Did anybody ask us whether we wanted the system. And now that most of the world have begun to realize that we need to ask, where did it come from? There was a riot in Bangladesh recently, which I'm sure many of you have followed, which resulted in the expulsion of the then president. Now, I do not favor any political party, but the question I'm going to ask is, the fight was about, basically it started from job quotas, which were restricted to certain freedom fighters and their families. So basically, it was a fight for jobs. A fight for jobs should be done in debate. It should be done in a quiet, peaceful demonstration. People were killed. I think we need to let that sink in. Because of the fight regarding the monetary system, people died. Another question that I'm putting to Bangladesh or everyone who understands what I'm referring to, now that the reigning president has been expelled, is your problem solved? Is everything now hunky-dory? Was it her that was the problem, or was it something else? Now, you and I, all the monetary reformers in the world, we may think that we are just running an NPO or NGO, but we have a huge responsibility to explain to the world what's happening to them, to explain to the students of Bangladesh, to explain to the political leaders of Bangladesh that it is not about jobs, it is about the system that you are practicing. Yeah. Now, this is the situation in Bangladesh at the moment. Yeah. 5 million people unemployed, 5 million, including 1 million graduates. Food inflation reached 10.22% per annum. 63.7 million people live in poverty. I think that's probably the whole of the United Kingdom almost. And the wealthiest 40% owns 41% of national wealth. The poorest 10% owns 1.3%. So we ask, will removing that particular president solve all of the above? I think we know the answer to that is no, because that is not the problem. The problem is, some of you, I do not know whether you have WhatsApp, but we use a lot of WhatsApp in Malaysia, and there is always status. I put down my status now as hunter invisible elephants. The monetary situation is the invisible elephant in every country in the world, which nobody sees, not even the government. Yeah? The UK, at about the same time, we saw there were riots in the UK too. Of course, there's a tinge of racial riot there, but really, if you look behind the events, you see that there is 1.53 million unemployed people in the UK, 500,000 graduates. Inflation once reached 9.1% per annum, and energy once reached 59% per annum. Inflation. The richest 16% owns 43% of the national wealth, and the poorest 50% owns 9% of national wealth. So this is the theme of my talk. Basically, I'm trying to say that even if you have 10% GDP growth, it means nothing to the poor people of your country. Yeah? So the question we ask our friends in Britain, will changing government from Labour to Tory and from Tory back to Labour change the above? I think you and I know the answer. You and I know. You and I, in this conference, we hold the secret to the problems in the world today, but our problem is the government will not listen to us. Yeah? In Malaysia, now let me talk about my country now. In Malaysia, we had 4 governments between 2018 to 2024. Unemployment did not go down. It was still 12%. And as the employable population rise, 12% means it's increasing. Unemployment was increasing in terms of numbers. For government, of course, they blame each other, you know. If I'm in power, this better. If you're in power, it's so bad. Through 4 governments, nothing changed. GDP grew by almost 22% in that period. Unemployment did not change. Poverty gap rose 3.7 times. Inflation rose 21%. House prices rose 100%. And the average graduate salary was almost static. It increased only 113 US dollar equivalent. Doesn't this scare you? We have government with access to all the intellectuals, all the academics. Nothing has changed. Why don't they listen to us? Yeah? Let me just summarize the Malaysian numbers. 2019 to 2024, 22% increase in GDP. Excellent. Congratulations. Well done. But youth unemployment rate did not change. The difference in we call them B40 and T20, meaning the bottom 40% and the top 20%. The difference in their salary, in their income in 1970 was 795 US dollar. In 2016, it grew to 3,009 US dollar. So how can you claim that you are fighting for the people when you can't even address this? Isn't it time we have monetary reform as a new subject in university, that people give respect and credence to our the things that we are pointing out? We are not challenging their position. We are just saying, look, this is a new subject. This is monetary system. This is what we have realized. Can you not take what we have seen into consideration in your policy making? Yeah? Inflation. Now, you notice, when it comes to inflation, they prefer a method which allows them to talk about inflation in 3% terms, 2% terms. This is basically inflation compared to 1 year ago. So when the general public hear the government leaders, wherever they are, talk about inflation, they hear them talking about 3%, 2%. You get lulled into complacency. What's wrong with 3%? Why don't they talk about the inflation this year compared to the base year? Why hide behind these numbers? In Malaysia, in real terms, the inflation has rose 512%. This is basket, the basket of goods. Now, I have my doubts about the basket. If you look inside the basket in every country, there are items where the inflation has gone 1,000%, 2,000%. It seems as if there is an effort to demean, to belittle these scary numbers. Yeah? House prices, my God, everywhere in the world, house prices go up. I have my own other reasons for that, but it's not perhaps in this conference. But again, I was a banker, as Mary said. I was a former banker. And bankers love housing. They give money to the developers to build the houses, and then they give money to the buyers to buy the houses. Excellent money, profit for them, and a profitable area for them. And they are the money creators in the country. Should they really be given the choice to decide which is good for them? We have given them a national right. Why is it they consider it a private right to give loans to wherever they want? We should say to them, look, if you cannot appreciate and honor the national responsibility we have given to you, hand over it back to us. We did not give you the right to create money to focus on housing alone. Yeah? Average graduate salary only increased $113. Now, this is the problem, I think, particularly in Malaysia, where our unions are not strong. We were told in 1950s, 1960s, you must be patriotic. You must help the nation. You must not be too strong in your labor. And this is what happened to us. I think this is what happened to most developing countries or developing countries, yeah, where we did not focus on the strength of our union. Now, I know in places like UK, where the union is strong, your salary is quite good. But in places, in countries like us, where we were told to be patriotic, nobody appreciated our patriotism. And just to paint the picture for the whole world so that we have a fair idea of the amount of unemployed graduates and youth because of this monetary system, it is said that 1/5 of the youth population in the world is unemployed. So if the youth population of the world is 1.3 billion, then 1/5 is about 260 million youth and graduates unemployed throughout the world. And if you want to assess how many people is 260 million, let me tell you, you take 7 Malaysia, you put it side by side, each with 34 million people unemployed, all 7 are full of unemployed people. I need to see your face, actually. What shall I do?
You want to see our faces?
Yeah, I without your face, as I'm talking on my own. Okay, I see it now. I see it now. All right. In Africa, 25% of youth, 40.3% graduates unemployed. Asia Pacific, 14.1, global, 13.2, Malaysia, 700, including 200,000 graduates. Indonesia, 1.4, Philippines, 1 million. Eric may update me on that. And I have numbers for Europe also. The biggest, the champion is, of course, South Africa. We still don't know why. We hope that they are able to solve it. 64% unemployed youth. Of course, Angola, Nigeria, and then we move on to the European countries. Georgia, 39.4, Spain, 37.1, Greece, 30.4, Italy. That's 1/3 of their youth population unemployed, including India. Yeah, that's a lot of people unemployed. Why? Let's be very, very clear. It is because of the monetary system that we are practicing. Too little money goes to the sector that creates jobs. In every country in the world today, what we call the SME sector, small, medium enterprise sector, creates between 70 to 80% of jobs in every country in the world. And the banks only decide to give 8% to this sector. That is why we have so much unemployment for youth and graduates in the world. USA, I got this off the internet. Correct me if the figures are now changed. 37.9 million of its residents live in poverty. And this is the most recent data from US Census Bureau. National poverty rate 11.5%, 7 million unemployed. So please, let us talk about removing human suffering when we talk of why monetary reform. Now, we're talking about an economics conference, that's fine. You know, but whenever I attend monetary reform conference and people talk about economic stability, people talk about transparency, then it saddens me. We should not be talking about those. We should be talking about human suffering. So let's not just focus the results to be economic stability, system transparency, private issues. Our result is to remove the human suffering from the system. Okay, so before I dwell on how the monetary system has pummeled humanity, let's examine this super Asian country whose population is supposed to be living in super luxury. Let's look at Japan. This is Tokyo today. I think this is all too familiar for you, right? These are people without houses pitching up tents in the parks of Tokyo, one of the richest countries in the world. And what is this? This is the long list of unemployed people lining up for free food. They put their back to us because they don't want to show their faces. I have plenty more pictures like this. This is in Tokyo. Homeless people lining up for food. And some of them live in internet cafes. They can't afford normal apartment and all that. They live in internet cafes. So what kind of society are we creating here? Singapore. Oh, we hear wonderful stories about Singapore. Now let's see Singapore. These are the sleepers on the Singaporean city streets. A family made a home in a certain part of the airport, the Changi airport. And these are some of the Singaporeans without houses. So really, we're not talking about growth in GDP. We're talking about equality in treatment. Global suffering, these are the normal pictures you'll find everywhere. World code, HTML for food. Homeless, please give me food. I think you know where this is. Yeah? Please help me, I'm poor and sick. I will vote for you. Thank you. So let's not talk about wealth until we're able to solve this. Yeah. Okay. Let me take the liberty. I'm sure that most of you fully understand the relationship between monetary system and human suffering. But in my engagement with the monetary reformer, not all. It appears to me not all seems to understand how the monetary system has created human suffering. So let me go through the effects one by one. Yeah, I've categorized about 5 effects of monetary system on humanity. The unending general inflation. I will detail on that. Unemployment of youth and graduate. Underemployment. Now, what is that? I don't know whether it exists in your country, but in Malaysia, we have graduates who, especially in the more regional states, who hide their degrees in order to get a clerical job. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because they don't have jobs. As a graduate, they're not offered any job, but there are plenty of clerical jobs, so they hide their degree. And in fact, the general salary of the non-graduates, of the more mature people, of their parents, are actually stunted. It hardly increased, I think, most parts of the world. You know? Rocketing house prices, widening poverty gap. I will go through one by one. Okay, let's talk about unending general inflation. How does it come about? Yeah. So whoever is given the right to create money in a nation, it must be obvious that they have to employ the money in the real sector. It is obvious. If you are the money creator, then allocate your money to the businesses, to the companies, to the enterprises, to the factories, to the farmers. They create output and inflation. Now, what kind of system? 80% goes to personal loans and credit cards. 20% goes to the real sector, of which 8% goes to the sector that creates 70% of jobs. If you create money and you divert it to the real sector, economic output is created, inflation will not arise. But if you give 80% of your money to personal loans and credit card, those are money being created when the output is basically unchanged. So that is so obvious that inflation will arise because this bank creates new money, added to existing money, and because we have never questioned them, every country in the world suffers from permanent inflation. I should not be spending too much time on that. I'm sure you know, but there may be one or two who has not known. Paper notes and coins only 3%. Most of the money in the world today are numbers. Numbers that move from bank account to bank account. We're talking about payment of $1 million US. Hardly anyone pays in paper notes. So the 97% of money in the world are monies that move from bank account to bank, or they are numbers. Okay. So the question we need to ask, where does these numbers in bank account come from? Okay. I'm trying hard not to hit on the economist. I'm an economist myself. In my textbook, when I was at the university, they tell me bank lend from deposits. Please, can someone tell me that they have changed that in the economic textbook? They teach the students, they teach our children bank lends from deposit. Whereas the reality is banks create those numbers. Okay, I will show in a bit. I will show you a bit how that is being done. So basically, banks create deposits out of thin air. It's just an accounting entry. When they approve for you a loan, of course, they will use their cash deposits first. When they run out of cash deposit, most of us think that they will stop lending. No. The central bank still allow them to lend by the accounting entry, create the deposit, create the loan. Create the deposit, create the loan. In fact, Bank of England says loans create deposit. The creation of numbers money by banks is confirmed by the Bank of England, the European Central Bank, and even the Federal Reserve. Okay, so once we understand that, we understand that we have given these people the right to create money, which is a national right. We need to rethink whether these people deserve to have that right. Okay, this looks complicated to you. I don't know whether I can try to explain. Let me try to explain this way. Okay, now every country will have a central bank. Okay. Now the only rule actually, when it comes to lending, the only rule the central bank tells the bank is you must not lend more than 80% of your total deposits. I'm simplifying it, but that is basically the rule. Okay, you are free to lend to whoever you want, but it must not exceed 80% of total deposits. So you are a new bank. You're a new bank. You open your new branches and you collect $100 million in cash deposit. People come and put their cash in your bank, and you actually have 100 million cash deposit. So following the rule of the central bank, you lend only 80 million. Therefore, you have not broken the rule set by the central bank, 80% of total deposits. And then you run out of cash deposit. Now, most people would think then you will stop lending. No, you are allowed to continue because you are now allowed to create deposits out of thin air. If you no longer have cash deposit, you are allowed to create loans by creating fictionary deposit and creating real loan. Fiction deposit, real loan. Fiction deposit, real loan. And if you add up the numbers, guess what? Total loans still does not exceed total deposit. Now, you and I believe that the deposit must be cash. No. the total deposits in the bank now consists of 100 million cash and 900 million created deposit. So as a bank, you have complied your central bank's requirement. Your loan must not exceed 80% total deposit. But what the public does not know is that the deposits are not all cash. Only 100 million is cash. The balance are created deposit. This is what is meant by creation of money. Yeah. But it's a very difficult subject to explain to the public. Okay. So as I said, the banks creating new money is confirmed by the Bank of England, European Central Bank, Federal Reserve, and our Stephen, Mary, I will give this slide to you. And these are the articles you can find even in the Bank of England website confirming money creation by the bank. Okay? So again, I'm reminding myself and everyone that the creation of money is a national right and a national privilege. Therefore, the people we gave the right to create money must do what is best for us, the nation. They must maximize loans to the real sector, the real economy, to create output. The banks do not do this. They consider money creation a private right. Where I'm heading to, Stephen, Mary, and everyone, where I'm heading to towards the end, I'm going to ask the question to everyone. Is an NPO able to fight the system? Yeah? As I said again, in the world today, 80% of loans goes to the personal and non-productive sector, only 20% the real sector. In the UK, from the Positive Money website, we find the formula 84-16. 84 non-productive, personal loan credit cards, 16% productive. One of the largest bank in Africa is 70-30. 70 to personal loans credit cards, 30 to real sector. Malaysia, 73%, 27%. This creates permanent inflation when too much money chases too few goods. And this is what I call lies, damn lies, and statistics. I'm asking them, why do you choose the method that allows you to say inflation is 3% when it's more correct to tell the general public that inflation is 500%? If you chose 2000, the year 2004, for example, as your base year to calculate your index for inflation, why not announce the inflation in 2024 compared to 2004? Why are you talking about inflation compared to the last 12 months? Unless that's what you want. Unless that's what you want to deceive the public. Because I'm sure in every country in the world, if you announce inflation from current year to base year, I think we're talking about every country with 80% inflation, at least. Yeah. This is my favorite graphics, where this is the bank with a big host of money going to housing, personal loans, etc., and too little going to the real economy. And we have inflation and unemployment. Okay? Unemployment of youth and graduates, I've mentioned before. Now, SME, I think every country will have a different definition. I think in America, it's probably called small businesses sector. And these are not your roadside stalls. These are your companies with 10 million US dollar sales. That's huge. Okay. Minimum of 10 million US dollar and below, they are called small business sector. And they create at least 40% to 60% of GDP. They are not insignificant. And they create within 60 to 70% jobs in the nation. But go and check the numbers. Your banks in your country have the wisdom to give them only between 4 to 7% of total loans. All right, they will say risk. Okay, but there are solutions. There are solutions to that. Yeah? So therefore, that is why we have widespread youth and graduate unemployment throughout the world. These are the percentage of jobs generated by the small business sector all over the world. Indonesia, almost 100%. Egypt, 91%. Korea. Yang Kim. When people mention Korea, they talk about the multinational organization, the Hyundai, etc. But in Korea, 86% come from small business sector, percentage of jobs. Pakistan, Japan, 74%. China, 70%. Yeah. Australia, 48%. Let's see, this is the African countries. So basically the message is the main jobs are created by the small businesses sector, the sector that your banks only give 7%, because we don't control them. We can't control them because they control the government. Yeah? Again, this is a repeat of what I showed just now. Contribution to GDP. Okay, Malaysia 40%, Japan 55%. Small business sector contribution to GDP. Japan 55%, Korea 50%. That's huge. We're not talking about insignificant numbers. We're talking about very significant numbers. This is Africa. Okay, now underemployment. All right. The small business sector on average creates 60-80% of employment in the nation and contributes 40% to 60% to GDP, but it gets only 4 to 7% of total growth. Now, apart from this creating unemployment, it actually stuns the starting salary. Why? Because every year we have young people, our children, our grandchildren, leaving the university, leaving the school to join the job market. But when our banking sector only gives 8% to the sector that creates jobs, there are just not enough jobs. Therefore, it creates what we understand is an employer's market. We have engineering graduates in Malaysia where their salary today, the new engineers today gets a salary hardly much above what it was 20 years ago. And if they tell their employer, this salary is too low for me, thank you very much, I will not accept it. The employer said, thank you. We have 20 other new engineers waiting outside the door to take this job. An employer's market. This is the other result of too few loans being given to the small businesses sector. And many, and you will see the unemployment rate throughout the world is very low. Government beat their chest. See, everybody is employed. But how many is underemployed? Accepting whatever salary just to put food on the table. This is the message we have to put across to the governments and to their advisors. To me, it's so sad in 2024, there is no government economic department that is talking about what we're talking about today. They talk about FDI, they talk about this and that. They never talk about what we are talking about today. Why? Rocketing house prices. I told you, this is the bank's favorite business because it's not risky. There is land. There is the developer who needs money to build the houses. There is the buyer who needs money to buy the house. This is, to them, this is perfect. You have given me the right to create money. Thank you very much. I choose to focus mainly on housing. And therefore, we create a lot of rocketing house price. I feel there's also manipulation in the pricing, but that one must be in a different forum. If you look in Malaysia, you'll find that the loan to the real economy is lower than the loans for housing. Only 129 billion US dollar to the real economy compared 174 billion to housing. I'm not saying that you should not lend to housing, but please, isn't the real economy more important to the nation? Again, the same picture which I showed just now. There you are. Is it the function of the banks to give loans for housing? Is that why we create them? Is that why we gave them the right to create money so that they can give loans for housing and make plenty of profit to their shareholders? Demonization of risk. This is something I think we need to realize. We need to fight. The demonization of risk is assisted by a compliant education system. Yeah. So the question we need to ask ourselves, we need to ask the government, is risk a demon or is it a required demon in order to promote the debt-based banking system? So if someone is able to demonize risk to such a level that you think it is the worst plague in the world, then you would hardly think of our banks investing via equity. They love the debt-based system, but therefore they perpetuate the demonization of risk. And I'm sorry to say, our education system supports this misconception. I will show a few slides further on. I will show you how banks can give investments via equity without having problem from risk. Okay? But the banks are not motivated to think about that, so they don't have to put their mind to it because they enjoy giving debt. Oh wow! I mean, you and I, when you and I enter business, we are subject to profit and loss, but they enter business compulsory profit. For their capital, they have a certain return, and if you do not give them the profit they deserve, the court will charge you. Wow! Just reflect. Do not accept this just because we have accepted this for too long. Do not accept it blindly. Just think about that. In our society, there is a section of people whose capital must be given profit. And if you do not give them the required profit, they can charge you in court. What an injustice to humanity. We should start rethinking and re-questioning this. Okay, in Islam, fortunately, in Islam, we have a legal maxim. Legal maxim is something that supports the Quran and Sunnah. That says rewards only with risk. In other words, any lending with interest is getting rewards without risk. So that is prohibited. In any investment that come out from you, you are only entitled to receive the reward if you are prepared to face the risk. So in Islam, equity finance is the real investment fund. Now, don't ask me about Islamic banking. That is a separate issue. You can ask me later, but not now, okay? Yeah. So when you lend and you get something without risk, in our definition, that is usury. And actually, when in my research, usury is banned in all religions, not just Islam. But I hear the ending bit of Prof. Hudson's delivery just now, and they will talk about usury. Yeah? So, however, somewhere in history, this narrative changed to only large interest is usury, small interest is not. That is a very, very bad move. Yeah? We should not look at the size of interest. We should look at the allocation of risk in the transaction. If one party is protected from risk, and the other party face 100% risk, that is usurious relationship, no matter it is 0.1% interest. When we say they face zero risk, they will say, no, oh, no, we face the lending risk. And this is what is the Latin word for that? Anyway, I can't recall. But when we have said lending is not a required transaction, they cannot be talking about lending risk. So we need to rethink. I urge all of you to restart the fight for usury to be even small interest. Yeah, because we need to look at the allocation of risk between the two parties. Okay. Can equity work in banking? Stephen and Mary, please stop me if it's time for a break. Because I can speak for hours. My children say, Papa can speak for hours. Stop me if this time.
If I'm just thinking, if you think there's a time when we could break out and you have a question for us, say if you want to ask a question, you could create a breakout of, say, 10 minutes and say we should think about this question, or you should come up with an answer.
Okay. Let me wait until the 50th. Let me wait until the 50th slide, because the 50th slide is halfway, and then that's when I will pose a question to everyone. I think that's a question from Eric. Okay, let's hear from Eric. Eric, please. Eric, you raise your hand. You are muted.
Hello, hear me?
Hi. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. I'm very grateful for your talk. It's very interesting. You are a neighboring country of the Philippines. I really hate the bankers. Thanks God. Salam, brother. Thanks God.
Yeah.
Salam, brother.
Right.
You are a monetary reformer, and this is the very issue that I'm very, very interested in. Particularly, you talk about pernicious cause of inflation. It's the government debt. And inflation is created with the bankers. The bank loan, both the lower and higher interest rates, I call it bankers' arithmetic weapons of mass destruction. So I promote really here in the Philippines, the government must take the powers of money creation from the private banks, cut its contracts with the foreign and global bankers, and create our own money. Then cancel off the debt we have paid more than too much, and give dividend to every citizen. I am very, very grateful for your talk. This is very interesting. I wish to have the video of the YouTube in the future. You can send me, and then I can use it in my future People's Forum here in the Philippines, because the interest rate is so high here in the Philippines. This is I call it really a very criminal that caused inflation, and this is the big problem. We are paying almost 44% per month, or even 24 days of interest. And inflation is based on a syndicated scam and crime against humanity. You know what happened in Libya? Remember in Libya? They have the best central bank once in the whole world. But, the America and the United Kingdom and the NATO and the war criminals put them down. And the Libya was giving money to every citizen at the time. They have the state-owned central bank. And the usury was prohibited in Islamic law. And in Jewish law, it's prohibited in Christianity. But the Catholic Church, do you understand, is promoting, there is a church here lending money at interest. The Catholic Church. So this is a very serious matter. That's why this is my challenge, that this control of the money, the monopoly of credit, is the worst crime of history against humanity. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. That's a question from Nick. Please, Nick. You're muted.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation, Dr. Zahid. I just wanted to kind of bring a thought up that we've moved from colonialism, where the developed world colonized countries with military force. And now the global South countries have been colonized by our bank-created debt money system.
Absolutely.
And the monetary reformers, we've just found out about this, and that's why we're up in arms and trying to change our system here. But we're not in charge of it.
No.
And the way, the only way I see forward is public education to get people aware of what's going on, whether it's in the United States, in Philippines, in
Absolutely.
your country,
Malaysia.
Malaysia. Thank you. I got lost in my geography. I'm sorry. But anyway, your thoughts on that. Then I wanted to ask you a question, because you said you're a former banker. When you were a banker, did you realize that your bank was creating that money out of thin air when they made loans?
No.
Thank you.
I haven't a clue. I believe what the economic textbooks say. We lend from deposits.
That's why we need education.
Very honest. I mean, but I think today most bankers still do not realize that.
Okay. A wonderful presentation, Doctor. Thank you.
Thank you. It's not over yet. Plenty more. Wait, who is this? Elizabeth, please. And Howard. Elizabeth first.
Yeah, but you know, something else happened. Women started to work. And the jobs women have now was before done by people that just entered the market. And we could have, I think one of the big mistakes women slipped is that they totally devalued the work women were doing. And they still have to do it. It is not get done at all, or the quality of life has suffered, all sorts of things. I think if we had done, for example, if married couples could have split the income for income tax, like instead of paying taxes on $60,000, you pay taxes on $30,000. That would have given extra work. Women could have worked part-time maybe. And then women, when they're in their late 40s, when their children are finished with school or something, and there's still 15 years where women would be very capable of doing a lot of jobs. But I think the whole system has changed. And nowadays, I mean, most women nowadays, they don't know how to sew on a button anymore. And that was all, that was all free labor that was done before. I think that has influenced the whole thing too. This is why we have this enormous youth unemployment.
You know how they ignored housewife works in calculating the GDP, right? I mean, that's
exactly. And that was exactly, I think I think women's lip made very much that the only valued work men were doing, but all that unseen work women were doing had no value at all. And now it's not done at all, or it's done after everything. Anyway, I think this is one of the weaknesses we have now.
Okay. Thank you, Elizabeth. Howard, please.
Yeah, thanks, Zahid. This was really wonderful. I really appreciate it, and it's inspiring. Hard talk is exactly what we need, and I think it's not just us, and it's not just the leaders, but it's also the electorate. You know, people have to wake up to this and organize and you know, to make a difference. And there's a reason why they say, you know, if it leads, or if it bleeds, it leads. You know, and so that focus on the suffering does bring attention to the issue. And my question was kind of that, you know, the monetary system causes poverty. And of course, it concentrates well to the top. So there's nothing left for those at the bottom. And, but it also causes the suffering of war. And I wonder, is that too controversial to talk about? Or do you think just the basic economic suffering day to day of people is that really the more effective focus?
That's too close to the heart at the moment now. It's too close to the heart to talk about. Let's move on to Joe, please. Joe, please.
I hear you. Oh,
Joe?
thank you. Wonderful talk.
Hello.
Hi.
Thanks for the great talk. I have a comment and a question. My comment is, My comment is that the inflation is part of the reason, I think, that there's more unemployment and more poverty, because they're so concerned about inflation that they purposely create unemployment. They purposely slow the economy down. And if you look back at the end of World War II, the last 3 years, from, well, year after, 46, 47, 48, there was almost 30% inflation, and the interest rates weren't raised, where they reacted so strongly after the Russian invasion. So, I do think that's part of the problem. That you can, I think your notion of increasing capacity is the right approach. They waited those 3 years after the war, the markets normalized, investments normalized, consumption normalized, and it created the capacity to reduce inflation. So that's proof of what you're saying. My question is, my question is the Islamic banking model any less profitable? I understand it's a different way of doing things, but is it actually any less profitable? Thank you very much. And thanks for the great presentation.
The Islamic banking system, Joe and everyone, there is the ideal system and there is the practice system. The real system is based on equity, pure equity. The current system is based purely on debt, trying to fit into the current international monetary system. So I think from those words, you understand what it's all about. What I'm saying is that it's not the real banking system at the moment.
So the ideal is not, you're saying the ideal is not actually being achieved in Islamic countries.
Yeah, the ideal will be achieved when we are able to implement sovereign money. But at the moment, it's just another debt system.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Michael, please.
Thank you very much for this very interesting talk. I have one question, and it's about the causes behind banking crisis in the context of banks having the power to create deposits. So if we look back in 19th century Britain and prior to 1971, when Nixon delinked the dollar from gold, there was a kind of obligation towards the public on behalf of banks to convert deposit receipts into metals. But after 1971, and in that context, the bank run could occur if depositors would go and ask actual precious metals. But after 1971, since money and deposits have been delinked from money and from gold or any precious metals, and banks keep creating deposits, but they do not have the obligation to convert them into kind of any precious metal or anything else. If people ask for, they are non-convertible deposits. So in this context, what does it mean to have a banking crisis? How is it possible if the banks, what they give out, they created? How can you have a banking crisis? You can only have an inflationary crisis, in my understanding. I do not see how a bank can be insolvent if it is creating the money without any kind of obligation to convert it into a precious metal. So what does a banking crisis mean in this modern banking?
Okay, to me, the banking crisis is them shooting themselves in the foot because the central bank puts up absolutely ridiculous conservative actions the bank have to do to protect themselves. Even loans that are not really bad can still survive. The central bank insists that they make provisions for it. So basically, the banking crisis arises principally from debt and principally from the regulations set by Basel, set by the central banks, which really is very, very tough on banks. I might add here, I think this debt issue is very well discussed by Professor Rogoff and all that. And Stephen, there is a professor in Malaysia called Professor Nazari, who specialize in this, I would recommend that you talk to him. Michael, that one is can I take a pass on that one, because I think that's more on not so
please
much.
Explain inflation. Can you please define very well inflation? That's very important here, brother.
Is it Eric?
Yes.
Yeah, define inflation. It's very important here because this is the root cause of the problems now.
Yeah. Well, basically, under our system, Eric, there is no central bank in the world who says that we will wipe out inflation. Every central bank in the world says we will control inflation. So that is an admission that the system they are administering is inbuilt inflationary. Okay. So inflation basically is where too much money is chasing too few goods.
Yeah, ridiculous.
Yeah. So basically, in our understanding, a simplistic monetary reform understanding is when the bank give out personal loans, new money are created to chase a fixed amount of goods and services. That's why we have permanent inflation. Okay, let me move on, if I may. There's still quite a lot. Thank you for all. I noticed that you're not sleeping. You're listening to me. Thank you. I can't be that boring, Stephen. Okay. Now the question here: can equity work in banking? Has it ever been given a chance? Or the demonization of risk will put this topic into the unspeakable topic. How could you even think equity? Well, let me tell you of a system that I have tried to implement in Brunei, etc. But so far, I have not yet found a country who will implement this. Okay. Now, can equity work in banking? And my answer is yes. If bank officers are paid a basic allowance plus profit sharing with their banks in all bank equity investment in businesses, that sentence just describes what I'm trying to say. So today we have bank officers and they monitor lending. So when bank officers monitor lending, it's a very easy job. Banks do not lend unless they are collateral, unless you get guarantee of profit and all that. So they can manage a huge number of loans, and the number of officers in the banks are relatively small. Yeah? But we can do it the other way, and because of that, they will say that the small business sector is too risky. It's too risky for us. That is why we cannot lend too much money to them. We prefer to lend to the big companies because these companies are good. These companies got collateral and they are not likely to default. But the SMB sector is too risky for us. Why? Because the number of officers that the bank maintain is too small. Right. Now, my proposal is to increase. Today, if you go to any branch in Malaysia, and I'm sure the answer is the same everywhere in the world, if you go to any branch, bank branch, you'll find at most 2 credit officers processing the corporate credits and the small business sector credits, because they are really more focused on personal loans and housing. If we were to engage what this model I'm suggesting, every officer we can have 50, every bank branch we can have 50 officers. That would put the human resource manager in delirium. They would accuse me, Zahid, how can we have 50 bank officers in the branch? We can't afford to pay them the salary. So I tell them, no, we don't pay them salary. We pay them a basic allowance so that they survive, and they have a profit and loss sharing arrangement with the banks. The banks no longer lend to the small business sector. The bank invests in the equity of these small businesses. Okay. Now you, because there's so many of you, there's 50 of you, I'm going to allocate about 5 to 10 businesses to you. You go and visit them every day. Don't stay in the bank. Go and visit them and make sure that they are doing things well, so that we will reduce the usual risk that we fear about small businesses. And when you are at the bank, ask them to prepare their accounts every quarter. So every quarter you will determine the profit. You will bring back the bank's profit, metaphorically speaking. And when you bring back the profit to the bank, we'll share that profit with you. Okay. Now, the good thing about this system is SME have full access to funds now. They do not need to have collateral. They do not need to be to give guarantees and all that. They have access to bank funds. Okay, and bank can lend them without too much risk because your officers are there all the time. So you remove, number one, the collateral requirement. Number two, you remove the risk worry. Okay? Now, in an area where there are so many SME, so many small business, they will create secondary jobs. When there are about 1,000 small business in one particular area, you need the hotels, you need the fire brigade, you need the petrol station, you need the restaurants and all that. So secondary jobs are created, and therefore you will create a lot of jobs. When you fund the sector that creates 70% of jobs, then you will create a lot of jobs. You will remove youth and graduates unemployment. Okay. Now, of course, you're gonna ask, where are these bank officers coming from? They will come from the unemployed graduates and youth. Okay, and then you might say that, oh, not all the graduates are economics graduate or business graduate. They are sociology graduate, psychology graduate. We will then now talk to the universities, put them into a business school of 1 year. 1st January, they go in as unemployed graduate. They go into this investment school at the university. 31st December, they come out as capable investment officers. So, of course, that is still needs to be proven, but give us a chance. Let's prove it. But of course, nobody have listened to me yet. Brunei did not listen to me, and I'm still on the lookout for a country who wants to try that. Okay, so basically, my point is, it is possible to have banks investing via equities, and therefore creating a lot of jobs and economic output for the nation. And these people that is in charge of the system now, they don't even want us to think about this. They will promote risk as probably the worst possible plague in the world, so that we don't even think about it. Okay? Let me move on. Poverty gap. Okay. You saw in Malaysia, we saw that the poverty gap in 1970 was $795. In 2016, it's already 3,000. Global poor, 2019, 689 million poor, almost a billion. 2022 increased to 712 million. Poverty gap, rich and poor. OECD countries, the poverty gap increased 7 times. And it was 7 times the difference. In 2024, it's 9.5. Africa, 2019, 478 million in extreme poverty. And in 2021, 493 million in poverty. So we just reflect on those numbers, and we have a defective monetary, domestic and international monetary system if the poverty gap is increasing throughout the world. So I am not proud of what the world has achieved so far, and I'm sure you too. Okay? So why is there a poverty gap? This has much to do with monetary system. Banks give what is called seigniorage of money to the rich. That's a good Scrabble word, Mary, if you can spell it. Huh? So basically, when banks give money, they give it to the rich first. who will use the money to buy. And because the goods are so little, the price goes up, the poor suffer. So that's basically the monetary system. And then I saw somewhere that because inflation is permanent, lower income people suffers more from rocketing housing costs because out of their income, when they deduct what they need to pay for housing, they have too little to spend on food compared to the rich. Okay, so that is how the monetary system is increasing the gap between the rich and the poor. Okay, now how to solve it? I'm going to stop the widening poverty gap. Okay, Stephen, I've reached the halfway mark. Shall we stop for a while here, and then maybe we ask the participants to give their thoughts, give the new thoughts. I like to hear new thoughts that we can learn from.
We certainly can do that. We have 15 official minutes. If we go over a little bit, that's okay too. I don't know how we we'll be here a few more hours. We'll turn into your children soon.
No, let's listen from them. I'm sure everyone have a point that we can learn from.
Okay.
The people are raising hands. Sorry, Mary, I ignored you. I should have ignored Stephen and talked to you instead.
Thank you very much. I'm learning a lot from this, and I also really appreciate your attitude about it, that we all suffer together, but you're able to laugh when you can. I appreciate that. But a question I have, I've had it kind of for a long time, but this is a perfect time to bring it up right after you talk about the widening gap.
Okay.
The widening income gap. I wonder if you consider that gap widening is this long trend from the beginning from when this system was formalized in Europe with the central banks and everything 300 years ago, that because of all the cumulative centralization of wealth and power over that long time, do you consider that that's an important piece of the widening wealth income gap? And then the second question would be, as Howard mentioned too, confirming your idea about looking at the suffering that's being caused, is talking about that accumulated problem of this system. Is that a valuable thing for us to start learning to talk about with people, so that people have to ask, well, how long can it go on? Doesn't it have to stop somewhere? I don't know. I hope I've made the question fairly clear for you.
Thank you. Let me answer immediately, please. Otherwise, I will forget. Okay. Mary says, did it start historically? I think that everybody knows the answer to that, right? I would recommend, if you have not read a book by Ellen Brown, The Web of Death, or something like that. No? So that basically describes what happened.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
What happened. So basically, I'll just put it in terms of quotes. Okay. Before the introduction of Federal Reserve, there were no taxes in America. Okay?
Right.
And in throughout the world, every country, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, they have something called public banks. And these public banks are banks that lend direct to the real sector. And these countries actually flourish when they don't have to deal with commercial banks who favor personal loan. They deal with only the public bank that focuses on giving money to the real sector. The country actually flourish. I think Eric is here, a member of the Social Credit Organization. The Social Credit Party of Alberta, who ruled Canada from 1920 to 1971, actually was a public bank. Okay, and then they focus a lot on the public, on the real sector, the infrastructure. and Alberta flourished. But every single one of them, the Social Credit Party was killed off by the funding of an opposition party, and the public banks were all brought down by certain people until we have this current system that we have now. So I would not want to mention names, but I would mention books, okay? Books like Alan Brown in Web of Death, and Griffin, the creature from Jekyll Island, Economic Hitman. Now, these are compulsory books that make us understand where we are today. Thank you, Mary. Elizabeth.
You know, this has nothing to do with banks, but another thing that happened, we have kept lowering the taxes on corporations. So what corporations before, if they had too much of a profit, they would pay higher salaries or invested in the company. But now they rather go and keep the money and give it to the shareholders. And I think that has something to do with it. Corporate taxes are competitive between international. So it would have, all countries would have to raise corporate taxes.
Okay. Elizabeth, we have something new to tell you.
Good.
If we implement, you are from Germany, right? Are you from Germany?
No,
where are you?
I'm from Austria, but I'm Canada.
Oh, Austria. Okay. If we implement sovereign money in Austria, we will remove individual taxation. We may maintain for companies, but for individuals, do not have to pay income tax anymore. I will explain to you later. It's a big subject.
When did they actually start? Was it not the First World War? They started to collect income taxes before they didn't have income taxes.
That one I need some European historian to tell me. I know the Federal Reserve, before the Federal Reserve, there was no taxation. It only arose after the formation. Anyone can answer Elizabeth's question? When did you start collecting taxes in Europe? Anyway, we wait for others to answer.
I have a response. I'll give it later. For
yeah.
United States or earlier periods, there was sometimes what was called a head tax or a poll tax. The wealthy could vote, or on a head, or sometimes there'd be a head tax depending on your household size. And but those were hard taxes to collect, and people would fight those, and they were not consistent.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Next will be Payvac Kokabian. Where are you from, Payvac? Unmute, please.
I'm in US, but I'm originally Kurdish.
Okay.
So my question is, you are right in your proposal on a public, the equity banking, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And still it's viable in many countries who the central bank has not been taken over completely by the commercial bank. You know, your proposal would work for the countries, and I see it very viable. Let's say Turkey, Morocco, Malaysia. Those places, there are small to medium corporate and investment banking who are in competition with each other fairly, and for that reason, they look for having a more share in other industry by equity banking. But the problem in the West, especially in North America and the Western Europe, Europe in general, because right now it's controlled by the one currency. The problem is that the business of making money and lending out based on a fractional reserve banking is so lucrative that they are not interested to become equity banking. Equity banking 100% has risk involved. So that is the reason. Okay, when you refer to the Alan Brown Web of Death book, so she truly addressed that problem, that the banking should go back in the hand of the state, which there are lots of proposals. And then the question will come as, what is the next step? So if the banking goes back to the state, then we can differentiate between the currency and the money. Money is different than the currency. State banking or central banking, state central banking means that you are in a business of issuing the currency, most probably with the zero interest bearing, okay? And then the bank, commercial bank or private banking will be in the same level of other industries who are competing for the benefit and profit, okay? But right now, unfortunately, the Western central banking system is totally, it's the uber god of every industry and the economy. And that is the reason. So your equity banking is pretty much doable and possible if the monopoly and the god privilege had not been given to this sector. Thank you.
Agree. Thank you. Susan, can you unmute and show your video? Can somebody? Susan, can you hear? Susan Peters.
Let's go to Michael and come back to Susan.
Yeah, all right, go back to Susan later. Michael, you have another.
It's a quick follow-up related to my previous question. So I'm wondering if you could explain how are non-performing loans that you mentioned earlier a problem to a bank that is structured in a way that is like creating the deposits that it lends out. So in the theoretical framework where banks are intermediaries, I can see how a non-performing loan poses a challenge to the bank who allegedly intermediates between, if the borrowers do not repay, then the bank cannot repay the depositors. But that's kind of a myth. This is not how a bank works. Banks, like you said, create the deposits. So if a bank creates the deposits that it lends out, what does it mean to have a non-performing loan? And how are banking crises like a problem within this framework? I guess based on what Professor Hudson was saying earlier, you can simply write down the debts or something like that. How is a non-performing loan a problem, or what does it mean to have a banking crisis in the modern framework of banking?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Michael. My chairman of Movement for Justice Malaysia, I think he spoke on AMI conference a few years back. His name is Professor Kamil. He says that all bank loans belong to the public because the bank basically have usurped our rights to create money. So basically, what they're saying, Michael, is they took this right, they create money out of nothing. And when you don't pay that money, they are upset. So technically, if we're talking about the cash deposit that the depositors put in, and that money is not repaid, then we can see it's a problem. You cannot you cannot give dividends to the depositors. But if it's money you created out of thin air, which actually belong to you and me, and you are upset, the people that you gave the money did not pay you back, you're not entitled to be upset. So as I said, okay, I understand you are very academic and you're going to write academic papers. I will point you to this. Look at the central bank regulations, okay? The central bank regulations on the bank are crippling, are very, very, very ridiculous regulations, okay? Even exceeds. Those of you who are familiar with accounting, we have accounting standards, okay? The accounting standards body imposes accounting standards on all the accountants, but the central banking imposition on the bank is very, 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 very specific, and they put in ridiculous regulations so that the banks will never lose. So their intention is to maintain the system. No banks fall. So they make sure that you operate so conservatively that only your shareholders benefit. It does not matter to them that the nation you operate in does not benefit. It does not matter to them. So they put in, to answer your question, the regulations are so tough that the banks are made to suffer by the central bankers to ensure the system continues to exist domestically and internationally. Thank you. Go back to Susan.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you, but we can't see you.
Right. No. Okay. I got off of Google, and since then I haven't been able to use my Zoom. I don't know what happened.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much. I wanted your thoughts about the relationship of the current and past banking system and what we have today in our world, which people have called a technocracy. So that, and I know this from my studies, the bankers have always controlled the technical innovations that come along. And I'm wondering today, do you have any thoughts about that? Because technocracy is I live in New York. Everybody has a cell phone.
Okay. Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay, I understand. Technology. I think the bitcoins and the cryptocurrency, people have out technology the bankers. They are beginning to fear them because we have transactions which are called peer-to-peer. We do not need banks in order to settle transactions between us. Not that I'm party to it. I still
It looks like Zahid has his.
You're muted.
I'm muted. Oh my God.
You're okay now. You're okay right now.
Okay. So the answer, the short answer to your question, Susan, in terms of technology, I think the non-banker, the cryptocurrency creators have outpaced them. So they're now trying hard to regain that system. Basically, we've never got it right from the beginning. Even from Bretton Woods, 1944. Somebody showed me an article that John Maynard Keynes actually did not agree to the eventual approval of the system. He was promoting something called Bancor and all that. So I think it's still a work in progress. But I believe monetary reformers introducing sovereign money, public banking into their own countries is the beginning of reforming of the entire system for the goodness of humanity. Okay, let me go back to my slides, just a few more, and then we can have a question and answer session after this. All right, so how do we solve all these problems? Okay, so there are two solutions which most of us agree on. One is called public banking, the other is sovereign money. Now, I need to remind Americans here that when I say public banking here, and the Canadians, I do not mean the public banks that you are creating in your own countries at the moment. When I refer to public banking in other parts of the world, I'm referring to the banks giving money to the real sector. Okay? All right, let's go through. We're almost to the end. Okay. All right. Let me move my. Okay. Public banking. What does it mean? In what I'm trying to describe here.
You want to share your screen again?
Oh, I need to do it again. Wow.
Just.
Okay. Wait. How do I do it?
You find the Zoom at the bottom.
All right.
Of your computer.
Find the Zoom, and then
the green button that says share screen.
Okay, share screen. Oh, back here we are. Share. You got it now?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Sorry about that. Okay. Where was I? Okay. So let me put this. Let me hide this. Okay. What does it mean? It means I'm still referring to the normal bank that operates like any other bank, current account, giving out loans, financing. It is also a money creator. However, when I refer to public banking in this particular presentation, it is wholly owned by the state, or it extends its financing almost 100% to the real sector. As we see now throughout the world, 80% goes to the personal sector, only 20% to the real sector. So I'm proposing the ratio be reversed. This is what I mean by public banking. So before we talk about sovereign money in our nation, which can be a terrifying new subject to the government, to the people, we can introduce as phase one what I call public banking, which is essentially reversing the current ratio. In most countries now, the ratio between real sector banking and personal sector banking is roughly 80-20 or 70-30. So when we say public banking, before we go to sovereign banking, our attempt is just to reverse this ratio so that our banks now give 80% to the real sector, 20% to the personal sector. At the end of my slide, I ask the question, can an MPO do this? But let's just go through the slide first. As I mentioned before, in the 20th century, these public banks, they perform very well. The Australian Public Bank, the New Zealand, Canada. But they were intensely disliked by the private bankers. In the end, many of them were privatized to be private banks, which good for the shareholders, not so good for the nations they were operating in. Yeah? Public banks focus on financing infrastructure, manufacturing sector, and national services. And indeed, studies have shown that when public banking funds infrastructure, the cost is reduced by 50%. Again, that slide. Yeah. So the examples of successful public banks in the world, the Bank of North Dakota, USA, the current 4 biggest banks in China. The 4 biggest banks in China focuses more on the real economy than the personal sector. And historically, the Commonwealth Bank of Australia, Bank of Canada, Bank of New Zealand, which all brought massive and rapid economic development in their respective countries before they were all privatized. Let me share with you the effect of public banking. I'm going to compare the data which I'm able to access, which is China led by public banking and Malaysia led by private banking. You look at the GDP alone, you see that China is many times bigger in terms of GDP than Malaysia. I used to say that in 1960, China was what I described then as a village economy. But because their banks focus on the real economy, you see them now as an economic superpower. Whereas Malaysia, like all other countries in the world, we did not question why our bank were given the right to create money. We did not question that they gave more to personal loan and credit card than to the real sector. And the end result is what we see today. Okay? We could have been, all of us, every country in the world could have been a lot stronger economically than we are now. GDP rate China, it's about 6% on average per annum. Malaysia, about 4.3. Okay, now this, I'm beginning to show you some of the details regarding the 4 biggest banks in China, which happen to be the 4 biggest banks in the world. Now, you look the top 4 there: Industrial Commercial Bank of China, China Construction Bank, Agricultural Bank of China, Bank of China. All of them are majority owned by the state. All right? And because of that, you look at the real sector contribution, the real sector ratio. Just now, you recall, I mentioned that for us, it's 70% personal, 30% real. In China, from 1960, it's roughly about 60% real, 40% personal. Right? The Industrial Commercial Bank of China, 61% real. China Construction, 56, 58, 61. They focus on the real sector, which we did not. Okay. Oh, wait, there was, hold on. Okay. In Malaysia, we also have what we call public banks. You look at the 2 banks at the bottom there, Bank Pembangunan and Bank SME. And they are actually 100% owned by our Ministry of Finance. And they actually gave 100% of their loans to the real sector. But in our wisdom, we did not give these 2 banks the right to create money. We gave the private sector bank, the commercial bank, the right to create money, but the banks that were meant to build up our infrastructure, meant to build up our small business sector, we did not give them the right to create money. They have to depend on grants from Japan. So what can we say about this? How can our government are not thinking the way we are? Right? Okay, now this is Malaysia. We have 5 key top banks: Maybank, CIMB, Public Bank, RHB, Hong Leong. And interestingly, you see about 3 of them are majority owned by the states, but they begin to behave like private banks. You look at the percentage they give to the real sector. Maybank, our biggest bank, 34%. 66% to the personal loan and credit card sector. CIMB, only 30%. And we have this bank called Public Bank, which is a strange name, but it does not mean what we think. It's called a public bank. We gave them the right to create money, and they only give 13% to the real sector. Do we need this kind of bank? I would urge all of you to go back and research in your country how many of these types of banks are in your country. You gave them the right to create money, but they divert only 13% for the sake of the nation to the real economy, only about 87% for their own profit. We do not need this kind of banks. Okay? And if you go to the annual reports of the 4 big banks in China, you'll always find the word the real economy. The bank, ICBC, the bank always keep in mind its underlying mission of serving the real economy. CCB, we pursue the high quality development of the real economy. ABC, we played an active part in supporting the nation's real economy. Bank of China, we continually improve quality and efficiency in serving the real economy. I am still waiting for the annual report of the 4 top banks in Malaysia to mention the word real economy. And that's an exercise which Stephen liked to let you do for homework. Go and look at the annual report of your banks and find the top one. Do they mention the word real economy or not? Mm-hmm. Now, this is probably the most important table of the entire presentation. differences between economy led by public banking and economy led by private banking. All right. Economy led by public banking, money is focused in the real economy. You will see a jump in economic output. Economy led by private banking, money focused the personal sector, and you will see a jump in inflation. Why aren't we talking about this? Why aren't we seeing theses in our universities on this? Why aren't we hearing the opposition parties grilling the ruling party in government about these points? The bank's objective and nation's objective in an economy led by public banking are the same. As a result, we get strong economic growth and employment. In an economy led by private banking, banks' objective is to enrich their shareholders. The national objectives are secondary. Economic growth and employment does not reach potential. You saw our bank just now, Maybank, 30%, the real economy. So they are more interested in enriching their shareholders than achieving the national objectives. In an economy led by public banking, the banks execute national economic objectives. In an economy led by private banking, banks execute profit maximization objective of shareholders. And mentioned before, there are cost savings under public banking. And there is interest cost in all national infrastructure. And when it comes to international bids, you may wonder, how come China is all over the world? They win projects in Africa, they win projects in the Middle East, they win projects all over the world. Why? Because they have learned the secret of banking, all right? When we, let's say we are competing for a port in Nigeria. Malaysia is competing to build a port in Nigeria with China, okay? Now, Malaysia, Maybank have the company that's bidding to build a port, maybe it's called Sime Darby, they are competing, they are working together with Maybank, and then Maybank will charge so much interest. Whereas in China, the company that is bidding to build the port is dealing with their own national bank, who hardly charge them any interest or minimal interest, so they do not have the interest value in their bids. And when it comes to factories, cement, for example, the cement that goes to the bidding company is at a lower price. And if you see the China company winning the mandate and you decide to visit the port being built in Lagos, you will find that most of the workmen have crew-cut hairs. The workmen that came from China all have crew-cut hairs. Who are they? Members of the Red Army. So they have learned the secret of money, and that is why they are winning the international projects all over the world. Okay. Now, if you look at total private bank profits in Malaysia, actually that amount has already increased. Never mind, we use the old figure, 8 billion. Now, in my other slide, I will also show the saving. If you practice sovereign money, Malaysia government do not have to pay interest to the banks anymore for the money they need to spend on the country. So there is roughly about 16 billion US dollar available for the nation just by merely practicing sovereign money. And with this money, we can spend on basic income to the poor, free education to university, and dear Elizabeth, we can remove certain income tax. However, if we proceed with our current system, we have a nation burdened with inflation, youth and graduates unemployment, rocketing house prices, widening poverty gap. So the choice is ours. All right, this was supposed to be the assignment. I think we can do this later. Go to the annual report of the top 5 banks in your country determine percentage of public ownership and percentage of private ownership. From the account, notes of the account determine percentage of loans to personal sector to percentage of loans to real sector. I assure you, it will not go far from 80-20. 80 to personal sector, 20 to real sector, which means your bank are not doing the best for your nation. The banks are doing their best for their own profits, and they couldn't care less what happened to the nation. Right, sovereign money, a few more slides. What is it? Every NPO will have a different version. This is Malaysia's version. We propose the money to be created by a state body. It could be the central bank. It could also be a central monetary authority. Okay, but the most important thing, if it is a central bank, we will take it out from the Ministry of Finance, and this bank no longer reports to the Bank of International Settlements. So in other words, the body that is creating money in Malaysia, I think our latest version is that we prefer the money to be created by Central Monetary Authority, is a body which is independent of the ruling government and reports direct to Parliament. Because in Malaysia, the minute you mention money created by anyone else other than the bank, you will hear screams of Zimbabwe. They are trained to do that. So we say our money is created by Central Monetary Authority, independent of ruling government, reports direct to Parliament. And our banks can still continue to be, they are no longer money creators. They continue to be private payment banks that handles the payment system. It's like debit card system. They only pay what is inside your account. And then we have the private investing bank that invests in companies on Mudarabah Musyarakah. These are equity principles of Islamic banking. I will explain a bit later. We also propose the setting up of a state investment bank to receive the money from the Central Monetary Authority, and they will invest in the real economy of the nation in the model of public banking. So therefore, we now have a system no longer where money is created by the private banks. It's created by Central Monetary Authority, independent of the ruling government, reporting to Parliament, and the money is given to a state investment bank who will release 100% to the real economy. So that immediately you will see increase in economic output, increase in employment. So money required for the nation can be prepared by the Economics Committee of the Finance Ministry and submitted to Parliament for approval. And then there are many ways of creating the money. In accounting entries, some people prefer to maintain the debt relationship, but I prefer the money to just be an accounting entry, credit reserve, debit government operating account. And as mentioned, transfer to the state investment bank, investment in infrastructure, real economy. And we will have Al-Hisbah institution, which is a governance institution, to oversee the economy and the operations of all the important entities in the economy, including the central bank. So how investing in the current private bank operating account can restructure itself today? So these are for countries that want to do it without major reform structures. They can just increase their lending and financing to the SME, which will increase real economic and increase employment and real economic output while mitigating risk concern and payroll costs of bank officers. So this I've explained just now. This is all about the economy run on equity, where we have investment officers instead of credit officers. Where as a result, we have the small business sector will receive a lot of funds. They will increase economic output. They will increase employment. They will reduce unemployment. They will increase the salaries by removing the employer's market syndrome. There you are. Okay, if we are to implement this, then what we will see is an economic output of the nation will experience a huge jump. as money is diverted 100% to the real economy, inflation will drop because the money now no longer goes to the personal loan, it goes to economic output. Poverty gap will diminish, unemployment removed as employment surge through a well-funded SME sector. Yeah? All right, on my last lap now, how to implement public banking and sovereign money. Stephen, you want to say something?
Yeah, we're 24 minutes overtime already.
Oh my God.
And I'm just, and your children are getting tired. They got to go to bed tonight.
Sorry. I've got only about five or six slides. Can I finish them?
Let's go quickly.
Okay.
And Elizabeth, they want to get their words in. The children want to get their words in.
Okay, sorry. Let me just finish this. How to implement public banking and sovereign money. So basically, I'm talking about politicizing monetary reform. I'm asking the question, can monetary reform be executed for a nation by an MPO? An MPO wants to execute sovereign money solution for a nation. What does it involve? It involves all this. Okay, taking money question away from bank, disable bank to do this, money to be created by the state. So my question is, and you have to create all this, the payment system, and a state investment bank, you know. So my question to all of you is, can an MPO implement this? Social Credit Party of Canada actually achieved all that overnight success, but they were ousted by bankster money funding another political party in 1971. And if you are able to implement sovereign money solution for the people of Malaysia or any country, we will have 17 billion available for the public. And this is what we can do. We can provide monthly basic income to the bottom 40, provide free education for all of us to university, abolish income tax for individuals. So I ask again, can an MPO implement this? Can an MPO implement all this? Thank you. Sorry for taking your time.
No. It's all good. It's all good.
Okay. All right. Now back to questions. Whoever wants to stay on. Oh, Elizabeth is putting her hand up. Stephen, you want to say something?
No, Stephen, Peshwak. Coco B and you, Sir Coco B, and you go first. I'm going in order.
Okay, go ahead.
Take your time. I had a few points, but I just want to mention one since we are running short of time. So as a graduate of a American economics program, master and PhD and MBA, I want to tell you that you are right. Unfortunately, and this point has not been mentioned other than Dr. Michael Hudson. In all economic textbook and curriculum, the fourth factor of production, which is infrastructure, is removed and not mentioned at all. So every model we have been taught as a student of this standard textbook, you have land, labor, and capital. Okay? There is no mention of infrastructure, no formula, no equation, nothing about the infrastructure. And as you are correctly mentioning, public banking means that you are creating a credit for a possible outcome. So all of those money, which is supposed to go to the entrepreneurs or peoples with the innovative real output to the real economy, they will either success or fail. If they success, they create job. But if they fail, okay, those monies on those credits on those investment will go and purchase some stuff. So it would not be inflationary. Anyway, the point is that the fourth factor of the production has been neglected in totality in all textbook and curriculum. And just last week, Professor Steve King had an interview with the, I guess, BBC. He said that do not go and do a major and study economics. Instead, go and study system dynamics. You can Google it.
Thank you. So the most important thing that we can learn that payback now is basically, Stephen, Mary, you might wish to consider. It's not just about the monetary system, it's about the education system, which is not teaching the correct things at the moment. Elizabeth, please.
Well, you're 100% right. I couldn't agree with you more. That was fabulous. But you're forgetting one thing. The debates are very powerful. Just remember what happened to Gaddafi.
Yes.
And, they're just itching to have a war with China. And both Gaddafi and Saddam Hussein were selling their oil for the local currency. And the moment they did that, I said, that's not going to work out very well. So it's a great idea. But I think with the powerful banks, it might be very difficult to get there.
It's a good thing being of mature age. Elizabeth. I'm 69. I really don't care what they do to me. Okay, please, Eric.
Brother, we Filipinos and Malaysian from the same race, Southeast Asia. I'm asking you a favor. Can you please visit the Philippines closer to Malaysia? I need your help here. We must declare a jihad. We must declare a jihad against the banking system. It is very urgent. I need your help here. Inshallah, may Allah help us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Eric. Okay, there was a few Eric and Eric. Okay, who else? Michael.
Thank you. Yeah, I have a question about the Chinese banking system specifically, and some aspects of it that seem to be quite perplexing to me. So we have the primary engine of financing development in China, like you said, are banks that are owned by the government on the one hand. The majority ownership is by the government, that they are also to some extent joint joint stock ventures. But what I find quite perplexing is the local governments have been driven into so much unsustainable debt, and they have to issue bonds, which are then bought by the banks, and compounding interest charges are the result to repay the original loans to the banks. And there is financing of, for example, infrastructure and bridges and roads and projects that do not necessarily generate cash flows. They might be important for development, but they do not generate cash flows to repay loans. And I'm wondering, to what extent is a reliance on a public banking system that nevertheless still charges interest kind of still unsustainable? And to what extent, for example, the central bank should be financing monetizing the investments in the development without interest charges? Or why has the public banking system in China, although it has created prosperity, it has also caused a lot of unsustainable debt for local governments? So I'm wondering what you think about that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Now, if you understand the whole context about money creation and all that, you will come to a point, actually, what I'm going to say is going to shock you. You will come to a point where you're not going to be worried about money creation. You're not going to be worried about debt of the government. Okay? Because debt for the government creates a generation of economic output. And I'm not talking about America, right? Put that aside. Let's talk about China and Malaysia. When debt is created by the government, it creates economic output. So if you have a nation, local government, or a nation with zero debt, that is not necessarily good, because government debt and household debt are two different things. Household debt, you owe credit card, you owe housing. Government debt, the money goes to the infrastructure. The money goes to infrastructure that create. For example, let me just share you our current concern at the moment. Now, Malaysia now is the focal point for data centers. Okay, Singapore used to be the focal point for data centers, but when data centers begin to demand the use of electricity, the use of water, then they cut down now the world is focusing on us delivering their data centers in Malaysia because we have the infrastructure to deliver the water, to deliver the electricity, and to deliver the space. And to build the infrastructure, we need to create debt. So if I don't know whether I'm answering your question. So debt to create infrastructure brings in the data centers from all over the world. So debt from the government point of view is not necessarily bad. From a household point of view, yes. Huh?
Yeah.
So you understand what I'm trying to say?
I understand how that can be productive. It's just that I don't really understand why the Chinese public banks have to charge interest on that debt. Why do they charge interest? Since 1995, there has been a reform where the central bank in China was like forbidden from monetizing government debt. The central bank cannot print money and buy bonds in China and finance the government. Instead, they have the public commercial banks to give loans for projects like infrastructure, but they also charge interest, even though that infrastructure project might not generate cash flows to repay the loan and interest. Why do they not give interest-free loans or equity instead of interest-bearing loans? Like, yeah.
Okay, I must confess that I'm not knowledgeable enough on the internal working of the China system to answer your question. But if you can reach me, send me the question, and I will try and research and come back to you with the answer. Okay?
Yeah, thank you.
A little thought I have, Michael, is that the People's Bank, before it became more westernized in China, the People's Central Bank, they would give money to the army, the Chinese army, and they would go in and do Army Corps of Engineering projects in different parts of China. And some of that money would be lost. It would just go into the local economy, and that was okay. They let it go. And so they do have a background to understand what you're getting at. And it's a good question, and they should think about that. So you're making a good point.
Thank you. Yeah.
Lucille.
Yeah. Okay. Hi, Zahid. Thank you.
Last question. The children need to go to bed. We have a long day tomorrow.
I'm sorry, I forgot it's Friday night. Oh dear, sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay. This is our movie and our popcorn.
Oh my God. Okay, Lucille. All right, go ahead.
So thank you for your work, Zahid, and the presentation tonight. Too much content, but you got through it. My question is, if we have to have a bank money system like we have today and for the last 300 to 500 years, then I would agree with you that shifting to some or only public banks is better, at least or especially if those banks are mandated to use their profits for the public good and not to loan for our purposes that are contrary to the public good as democratically determined. But it leaves in place and in full force the growth imperative built into the economy by our interest-bearing debt money system. I think maybe Michael was getting at that. So are you not also, or aren't you concerned about that growth imperative, especially if it's public banks with commercial banks and all of you are still engaged in an interest-bearing debt credit money system instead of a wholly public money system? That's my question.
Okay, I'll try to answer that very fast. Thank you. Actually, in our model, Lucille, we don't have debt interest lending. In the ideal sovereign money for Malaysia, we have equity investment by our banks. And I agree that we should not raise too much debt. But as I explained to Michael just now, debt by the government spending on infrastructure is not necessarily a bad thing. But that will be a very bad thing when it is used to fund the personal sector. I hope I answered that question.
Okay,
We must not allow.
Yeah, maybe you did and didn't, but you didn't then explain in your presentation how the you're I think implying that your equity banking system is sovereign money, and you didn't explain how you achieved that. Okay.
I explained that in 2022. I did not explain here because, as you said, too much content.
Okay. I was here in 2022, so I heard that. Maybe I'll listen to it again. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. Sorry, Stephen, I forgot.
No. Thank you, Zahid.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
It was wonderful. It was a full force. First, you have us suffering, and then you show us the way out. And so it was a hard talk for us, but we got through it, and we're delighted. And maybe, as Lucille says, we'll look at your 22 presentation and this presentation, and it'll be a complete package. But we got it, and there was a lot of appreciation. There was a lot of connection. I saw the energy of a lot of people following you. You made common sense, and you gave us ideas for how we can approach our people too. We had a Mayday for money, and a lot of your thoughts and your ideas could have gone up on posters, so we could have put them in front of the people who we were marching by. So you've given us food for thought, and we hope to see you soon in the future too. We thank you very much for all of this.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Stephen. Please engage with me individually for any question. Thank you.
Thank you. And how would I say thank you in Malaysia?
Terima kasih.
Terima kasih. Terima kasih.
Which literally means accept my love.
Okay. Well, accept my love.
Salamat po.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Salamat
okay,
po.
Bye-bye.
And for everybody, we're past due. All I can say is tomorrow morning, we start in with Jonathan McMillan, and he will go through those slides. It's a very important presentation. If you haven't seen it, it's the best. It's a wonderful illustrated history of central banking and banking systems thinking and corporate banking. We can add all of those terms together. And so we'll see everyone tomorrow morning. Jonathan's presentation begins at 9, but we'll open the doors. I think it's by 8:30. You know what it is. Yeah, 8:30, the doors open. So I thank you all for being here, and have a wonderful night. Get some sleep. And Carl, I can see you're still here. You got a good question in. Everyone have a great night and or morning, depending where you are. So we should say good night. Anyone have? Yeah, we're good. Okay, good night all. Oh, and Howard, we'll have to have a song tomorrow. Okay, bye-bye all.